Welcome aboard the Athletics Can't Wait Jets podcast, your nonstop shop for all things Jets with Tim McMaster, Zach Rosenblatt, and Marissa Dunn.
Can't wait.
I don't think any of us saw that one coming with a banged up offensive line, missing both starting cornerbacks. Oh, and their first backup cornerback. The Jets go out and hand the Eagles their first loss of the season. Unbelievable. I'm Tim McMaster, along with the Athletics Jets reporter, Zach Rosenblatt. Thank you for checking us out on the Can't Wait podcast. Happy to have you here, either on YouTube live or if you're checking out the audio version after the fact. Please subscribe. Give us a great review. That really helps us out as we continue to try to grow this YouTube page and also the podcast as a whole. Lots to get to today. Of course, we'll talk about the defense finally showing up for an entire game and being the defense that we really thought they could be. Greg Zuerlein's greatness. We'll talk about that. And he may be the MVP on this team at this point, the way this offense works. And of course, the red zone struggles. We'll get to what it all means as well. But first, and everybody at home goes, oh. But first,
no Taylor Swift talk, we promise.
No. Last week, though, Zach, we talked about Zach's birthday because we recorded on Wednesday. One of the reasons was because Tuesday was difficult for both of us, but the reason it was difficult for Zach was because it was his birthday. So we said happy birthday, but things got better as the week went on. Now, this was Saturday this happened, right, Zach?
Yeah, it was Saturday.
All right, check it out. This is from Zach's Instagram over the weekend.
My private one, so it's not my NFL one, so you guys are getting an exclusive here.
I'm showing it with permission. And big shout out to Samantha for putting this together for Zach on Saturday.
She did an amazing job.
If you are checking out the audio version, you obviously can't see this, so we'll describe. But basically, it's a 7-stop pizza crawl on Saturday through the rain. Zach, just tell us what it was all about. You started on Joe's on 14th and then went from there.
Yes. So Samantha surprised me with this Saturday morning. It was a rainy day, but we still wanted to do it. I'm a big pizza snob. New York foods. I've been trying to hit all the great spots, and there's been so many pizza spots I've wanted to hit. So she made up a 7-stop tour where we wanted to make our way to Brooklyn. So she formatted it around that. Started at Joe's, which is my favorite pizza outside of Italy in the world. And it lived up to the hype as always. And then we stopped at some other spots. I think second was there's a spot called Unregular Pizza in the West Village. It had square pies that were really good. Scar's Pizza, which is a very famous spot and very popular, was really good. The sauce was tangy. We're going food reviews right now. After that, we went to Industry in Brooklyn, which is one I've been dying to have. It's a really popular spot. That was good. We had a burrata slice there, as you see on the video right there. They went to this place called Finney's Pizza, which is owned by the same people that have Misi, which is this amazing pasta joint. That one, at that point, once you have a certain amount of pizza, you start to feel it, especially as you get older, I would say. That's around when it started. And then from there, we went to a spot called Aces, and that's where it really started hurting me because it was a Detroit style, but legit Detroit style where it was thick. And then we started struggling after that. And then we hit one more spot after that, Paulie G's, I believe. And that was really good. That was more a traditional, it was Joe's style pizza, but it was in a divey type of traditional pizza diner. But anyway, it's a fun activity to do if you want to surprise your significant other with it. If you love pizza,
I've never had Joe's.
Wow, you're the third person to say that to me this week, and that blows my mind. I know,
and I've lived in the city for over 10
years.
Maybe
we should do a can't wait date to Joe's.
Ooh, or we do a live broadcast,
live pod from Joe's. Oh man, I don't know if there's some interesting characters
a little crowded there
come rolling through Joe's depending on the one you're at. So that would be funny. But so you guys just got a little pizza bit. There were some spots the idea we want to do slices. So we didn't stop at places like John's on Bleecker or ones where you have to sit down and have a pie. Didn't do Prince Street, which I haven't had yet. I know some people, Connor loves that place. I've never been. There's a few other slices that I think we'll hit at some point. But yeah, so I'm in a foodie. I love pizza, and so it was pretty cool. Even in the rain, we still had a great time.
All right, how long? Just one question, then we'll move on to the Jets. But I'm just curious. 7 pizza spots, that's 7 slices. Is that breakfast, lunch, and dinner? Did you start at noon? How did that day unfold as far as the pacing of the pie?
We started at noon. There were some stops where we both split one slice because we just knew we had to be reasonable about it. Otherwise, we were gonna I needed a nap real hard after I got back. But yeah, it was. I would say it stretched it out from like noon to like 6 or 7 p.m. We maybe made a couple pit stops along the way at like a bar or two, or just checking out like some
All
stores.
that, you might as well have some beer to
Yeah, and I also, anyone who follows me on my personal Instagram knows I'm a big espresso martini head. So we stopped to get an espresso. Yeah, it was a fun day. I love going in the city. That's been one of the coolest things of moving up North Jersey. Because when I was a kid, we would like take the bus into the city or the train or whatever, and we get out and you'd be all amazed by the tall buildings and crap, and we do all the touristy stuff. But now that I moved closer, I'm able to like actually see New York, and I've loved it for the last, I guess, like 2.5 years I've been up here. It's a joy.
Got to come up to the 100 sometimes.
Yeah. Yeah, I will. Yeah, we got to meet up in the city. We did the one time for that one athletic get together.
That's right. That's right.
In person.
So
yeah.
that's something that I was like, maybe I should take on throwing this. So we used to have these gatherings for the athletic in the city for everyone that works in the area.
Yeah, we didn't do one this year, huh?
Well, the guy that always organized them isn't at the company.
Was it John? Yeah.
Yeah. So
Gotcha.
So somebody's got to pick up the con.
Nobody wants to do it, but
nobody wants that job.
We all want to meet up. We all want to meet up, but nobody wants to.
Yeah, no one loves. Well, it's a thankless job because you can't go well. Like
it's like planning a bachelor party. It's like it's not fun. The party's fun, but the planning it's not. Yeah.
You know what else is fun? Beating the Eagles at home.
There you go.
In week 6.
Transition Tim. There we go.
Week 6 of the NFL season. That went a little too long. But all good. If you're just joining us now, congratulations. But check out the audio version for the
if you like pizza, listen to the first 5 minutes.
Yeah. And one more shout out, but it is football related, and that is the Jets beat the 5-0 Eagles. There was one other 5-0 team, and they went down as well. And who beat them? The Cleveland Browns. And who started on the offensive line for the Cleveland Browns on Sunday? Michael Dunn. That's right. Good job, Michael.
Played
he had a heck of a game, battled through a little calf injury, and
Kevin Stefanski shouted him out in his press conference. Like, we love this. It's a great day for the world, football, everybody. Shout out to the Dunns. We don't have the other Michael Dunn in the chat right now. It's very disappointing. This could have been a big moment for him.
Always. All right. So as for the Jets, I mean, really, this game, it was an impossible game. Considering the injuries, even if it was just Aaron Rodgers missing, you would have been like, they're not going to beat the Eagles. But I mean, I have Devontae Smith on my fantasy team, and I was like, I picked the Eagles, so I wanted them to keep closer or pull this thing out. But I was like, this looks pretty good as far as passing, receiving yards. I like Zach. Let's start big picture, then we'll get into the defense. But like this win and what it means for this team, I looked back on our predictions for this season, and you and I both had this team 3-3 going into the bye. We were actually identical weeks 3, 4, 5, and 6. You had them beating the Bills. I had them beating the Cowboys, and those were the two flips. Otherwise, we both had them the same weeks 3, 4, 5, and 6. With a healthy team and Aaron Rodgers at quarterback, 3-3, and then everything gets easier after the bye. And now we're sitting here at 3-3, and everything gets easier after the bye. So what can this team do now?
It's pretty crazy. We were just talking about Marissa, and she just texted us actually. But anyway, it's a hard question to answer just because this week in particular made it so clear that it's such a week-to-week league. Like, you really never know anything. You think back, like, they barely beat the Broncos. And if they had lost that game, then everybody would have given up on the season. And now we're 2 weeks later, and everybody's like, Aaron Rodgers can come back this season and we can win the Super Bowl. So it's crazy. But this was even the game itself. Like, if you had checked in at various points throughout the game, you would not have thought the Jets were going to win that game. The Eagles did everything in their power to give it to them. The Jets defense absolutely earned every inch of what they got. The Jets offense did not, but they won. They beat the Eagles, the undefeated Eagles, a team with, as you mentioned, Devontae Smith and AJ Brown. AJ Brown had a great game, but he didn't score any touchdowns. They literally started a guy, and I pride myself on even knowing the bottom of the roster guys, like numbers, like stuff like that. Like, I feel like I'm pretty good about that among the beat writers. At some point there was a guy named I just blanked on his name. Like I feel actually bad at myself. Tay Hayes. A guy named Tay Hayes was covering AJ Brown at some point, and I even tweeted, I'm like, I'm not Tay Hayes. Somebody named Tay Hayes just covered AJ Brown. I'm not familiar with his work. And like this guy wasn't on the team 2 weeks ago. I looked into his bio yesterday. I think he's been signed to a practice squad or active roster 14 times, and he's been released 14 times, and that's since 2019. So he's been on and off rosters nonstop. One of those like journeyman types. And to his credit, and the defensive backs coach Tony Oden's credit, he got him ready. Craig James, I joked on Twitter.
James was lights out.
He had a pass breakup that prevented a touchdown, and I joked on Twitter because every Monday I like to tweet like some stats from PFF and whatnot and True Media, and I put all the cornerback stats, and he was the only one who didn't give up any catches. And so there are people targets, people are like Craig James, more like Craig Gardner or Sauce James, and somebody's like, I would let him date my daughter, and
I saw that one.
and I said what I tweeted was, a week ago, Jets fans, who is Craig James? Today, Jets fans, I would die for Craig James. Like that's the turn of events it's gone. I will say I did know who Craig James was because I covered the Eagles in 2019 when he had a game-winning pass tip to an interception against Aaron Rodgers of all people in Lambeau, and I covered that game. And Craig James came out of nowhere there. That was like his first snap of the game too. But anyway, so they played with all backup corners. Michael Carter II was there, but even he got banged up at one point. We're gonna get into like the details of all this, but Jeff Ulbrich had just a fascinating and fantastic game plan where he was moving everybody in the secondary around constantly. Like at one point, Bryce Hall's on the outside, and then he goes to the other side. Michael Carter's inside, and then he goes outside. Ashton Davis is getting some time in the nickel. They blitzed a little bit. To Taylor Delgado's point, they only targeted Craig James twice. The Eagles had a very weird game plan in a lot of ways. But yeah, ultimately at the end of the day, the Jets gutted this one out. Like this is kind of how, without Aaron Rodgers, this has kind of been their formula, and it's dating back to last year. It's ugly wins where you're running the ball and you're stopping them, and you're hoping the offense just breaks through once or twice. And
they didn't even run the ball successfully in this game either.
They really didn't.
Bryce Hall wasn't good.
Yeah, he had some like nice runs, and he had a couple catches, but yeah, like it's an ugly. I don't know if it's a style that can like win playoff games, like when you get down to that part of the season, but if you can get to the playoffs with this, I mean, look, we're talking about that again. Like it could very easily, we could already be like back off the bandwagon if they lose to the crappy Giants after the bye week, but I don't think they will necessarily. I'm just saying like it's very week to week, but for all the doubters, and I think there were some even about this defense, they put a target on their back with DJ Reed's comments before the season. Like they last year, we've talked about this. They needed a little ramp up last year too, if you remember. Like they weren't elite right out of the gate, and this was like their signature game, kind of like the Packers game, which was a year ago, like yesterday or today, I think. That Packers game against Rodgers is where that defense had a coming out party, and you had the same thing. Like you had so many guys coming up clutch. Jermaine Johnson forced 2 of the interceptions just by pressuring Jalen Hurts or hitting the ball out of Dallas Goedert. Bryce Huff was dominant, his best game maybe as a Jet, which is saying something. Tony Adams with the game-ending interception. They forced 4 turnovers, and I think I was listening to Bill Simmons' podcast. I think he said something. I forget the time frame, but it's however many years there's been like 29 teams that forced 4 turnovers, and only one of them lost that game. And for a little while, it seemed like the Jets were going to lose that game, and then you see, the Eagles. I'm getting in the weeds. Oh, big picture. Huge win, arguably the biggest one of Robert Saleh's tenure, just because of what it means for this season. We probably said this last year when they were 6-3, and then probably that Bills game, I would say, is probably where we were talking like that, and then they kind of fell apart. But something does feel different about this team. Like they really do seem to have a locker room that is sticking together. And Zach Wilson is holding himself accountable, and he's really like matured. And there's a lot of concerns, and we're going to get into them, especially on offense. Like there's legit concerns. But this is a group that wants to play together. They won a game without their 2 best corners, and that just goes to show you that how well coached that defense is at the very least. And so there's a lot of positives come out of this, and we'll get into them. A lot of negatives, but you go into the bye with a win like this. Like out of all the teams out of their 6, like if we were to rank the team they were most likely to beat and the least likely to beat, like Eagles might have been the least likely on that list if you just like look at how they match up with these teams.
And Patriots would have been most likely.
Yeah.
And they lost that one.
Yeah. And the Patriots look like maybe the worst or second worst team in the league right now.
Yeah.
Maybe not the worst. The Bears are pretty bad. But yeah, so, huge win. I mean, 3-3 going to the bye. Like, as you said, the schedule gets easier. I know you say that in NFL seasons, then it doesn't wind up mattering at the end of the year, but this team has the ability now to make some noise. And I would not have guessed that. Like, even if they had gone, I would have been okay. I think it would have been understandable if they went into the bye 2-4. I don't think anybody would have faulted them for that, even though they should have won that Patriots game. Like, I don't think, like, considering the circumstances of losing Rodgers, you lose Elijah Vera Tucker, you lose DJ Reed for 2 weeks, you lose Sauce Gardner at the last minute. By the way, he didn't get declared out until Saturday.
All right.
So, I mean, just Robert Saleh and Jeff Ulbrich deserve a lot of credit, in that locker room and those guys in it and that defense. Like, this defense is the real deal, and if they're going to go far, it's because of them. And we'll get into the Rodgers thing because there's more to talk about there. But yeah, I mean, fans have got to be absolutely ecstatic. Taylor Delgado just said culture, baby. It really is like the culture they're building here, where like the next man up thing is so cliche, but the Jets have really lived that the last 2 years. So it's a lot of interesting stuff ahead, and it couldn't be a better way to go into the bye.
And it's confidence too. Like, everything this team, you preach it and you talk about it and all that stuff. But then when it comes through in a game like this, I think it solidifies it in the minds of the players. And
yeah.
And we will see. All right. So it changed people's view of this team apparently as well. And like, this Jets team coaching staff basically took a bow today, front office. Like, it,
a little over the top.
It was a little weird how like the perception changed a little bit. Pat McAfee praising Robert Saleh for, putting it together and pulling out this impossible win. Pibble bringing up Joe Douglas's 2022 draft class again, because it shined even more as the kind of late picks in that game came through in special moments. Saleh's talking about Ulbrich now as a head coaching candidate. It just went down the line, Zach, where like this team wins a game they're not supposed to. They get to 3-3, and it's just like they're patting themselves on the back, and so is everybody else. It was wild today.
Yeah, I mean, and Robert Saleh, who's often the biggest like culprit of this, like, is always talking about how it's the apocalypse or it's the Super Bowl every week. When, especially in New York, you kind of would wish maybe they would handle the wins a little bit better. It is, I think it's okay to celebrate
Act
them.
like you've been there before,
but the Jets haven't been there before, which is part of it. But especially just because like this one in particular, like, I guess I get why you're celebrating because of who you beat and all they had been through and everybody counting them out and all that stuff. But it's a long season. Like, this will wear off pretty quick if you don't come out of the bye. And I'm not saying they won't come out of the bye ready, but if you don't come out and fix a lot of their problems, then we might not be as excited a couple weeks from now. So I think it's okay to say to temper it a little bit, but while also being very excited about, like you said, the 2022 draft, very, very much worth celebrating. Like, there's not a miss in that class, and it only looks better because Jermaine Johnson is starting to look like a star, like we thought he would in training camp. But you never know when you get to the regular season. Tony Adams living up to all the hype he had in the preseason now. Like, there's, the defense is like Saleh is catching both praise from like the fan base and some criticism from Cowboys fans specifically for his quote after the game where he said, "We had a gauntlet." I don't have the exact quote, but we had a gauntlet through 6 games of quarterbacks, which he's right about. And we didn't win all of them, but we dominated them. We dominated each one of them, or whatever it was, which it said, like, coaches don't usually talk like that. So I appreciate it. And he's like confident he loves his team, but I mean,
well, here's the numbers,
you didn't
right?
dominate Dak Prescott.
I don't have them all, but Josh Allen, a touchdown, 3 picks.
Yes.
Mahomes, a touchdown, 2 picks. Hurts, a touchdown, 3 picks.
And that was the top 3. That was the top 3 MVP voting last year, by the way.
Right.
So,
and I mean, that's even though they won 2 of those 3 games too. And and a lot of people will continue to say they should have won all 3 based on, some stuff.
Yeah. But the Chiefs one is one that got away weirdly. But yeah. So, I guess talk your shit to a degree, but also like, I think this locker room does have the right guys to like pull it back maybe as it gets closer. I think Rodgers, like, being in the building maybe even added to the excitement a little bit. But yeah, this is a good time that they do need to heal up. They do have a bunch of banged up guys. We should talk about one who they might have lost for a while, which is a pretty significant loss. on the offensive line. But I think this offense. I think the bye in the middle of the season is the best. I mean, maybe like a week or two from now would have been the best possible spot, but I think the middle of the season is the best spot for it. Get to like a halfway point, get to breathe a little bit, everybody heal up for a week, and then you come back around when they come back, and you have a Giants team that's reeling. They lost a game they should have won against the Bills. I don't know if you watched that game. Like, they had some baffling decisions, especially they had an end of first half thing that was reminiscent of the Jets last week, where Tyrod Taylor, I think it was a Taylor or Dable has been happy to throw his quarterback under the bus, but he claimed it was Tyrod's fault, like calling to a run, and then the clock ran out before halftime, and so they didn't get a field goal, and that wound up costing them. And then they called some. Anyway, I won't get too deep in the Giants. I think they're a disaster, and they do not have very much talent. So the Jets absolutely should not only beat the Giants, I think they should kill them, and I think the Jets should want to kill them for some New York supremacy. I did a little trolling last night on my way out, because I do have some Giants followers still, so I probably shouldn't have done this. But I saw the end of the Giants game, got to my car. MetLife Stadium was lit up with the green lights. It looked really cool.
Yeah.
So I tweeted, Giants are reeling. The Jets are rolling, which is an exaggeration. Good night from Jet Life Stadium. And so typically a lot of Giants fans were very mad that I tweeted that. Jets fans liked it. You got to pander every now and then.
Yeah, you do.
And
this coaching staff should feel extra motivation too, because a year ago, everyone was on Brian Dable's the guy. The Jets should have hired him the previous year, and they ended up with the wrong guy, and now it looks the other way.
Yep, totally. Again, it's early though. Like, Saleh still has a lot to prove this year, but they put themselves in a great position, and that's all you can say.
So one more thing on the defense, and then we can move over to the offense. But we've talked a lot this season about how they've gotten pressure on quarterbacks, but they haven't gotten home. And against of all quarterbacks, Jalen Hurts, they get home, right? Five times, 10 QB hits. I mean, and the interceptions, not the first one, which was a fluky play where, Quinnen's, where it went up into the air and just kind of ended up in Quinnen's hands. But the other two were...
Quinnen tried stiff arming a guy again, by the way. I don't think it worked as well this time.
I was like, just take a knee, Quinnen, right? Like, that guy running down the field with the ball is not what the last thing you need is somebody to do a low diving tackle on Quinnen Williams when he's trying to run the football. That was not great. But everything ended up okay. But the other two were caused by pressure.
Yeah. Well, the Quinnen one was caused by Jermaine Johnson tackling Dallas Goedert.
Well, right.
The ball. Yeah. But yeah, so that wasn't a pressure though. But yeah, I believe it was the second one was Jermaine deflected, or he hit, I believe he hit Jalen Hurts, and the ball just kind of went up in the air, and Bryce Hall grabbed it. Bryce Hall, second straight week with a huge play. I mean, it was right to him. Like, the other one was the fumble recovery. And then the last one was Tony Adams. It was a bad throw by Jalen Hurts. It was a strange.
He was kind of backpedaling a little bit, though, right, to get away. Yeah.
Yeah.
It was a weird play call.
Yeah, that's what I'm saying. So it's the Eagles are trying to run out the clock, and on 3rd and long, they call a pass, which, that's the kind of their reputation is aggressive. Yeah. Like, I get it. So ultimately,
it's not like Hurts. University of Miami not kneeling bad, but it just looks bad when it doesn't work.
Yeah, and just based on what guys on the Jets are saying, it sounded like maybe they had blitzed on that play earlier in the game with Tony Adams or the safety, and so I think they got in Jalen Hurts' head a little bit, and so Tony Adams stayed back instead of blitzing, and he had the pick, I think, is what happened. And then that set up the touchdown. And then there's the weird thing where the Eagles kind of let the Jets score. And there's been some debate over whether they should have. I actually agree with them scoring. I think you trust the Jets defense to stop the Eagles from going 75 yards up the field based on everything you saw that game. And the flip side of that, the Jets have had a hard time scoring touchdowns. So you take a touchdown when it's there. So
anytime you can get a touchdown.
So I don't think the criticism on that has been necessarily warranted, but yeah, that was those turnovers were huge. They forced a fumble as well. I'm blanking on what happened on the forced fumble, but I mentioned him before. We'll mention him every podcast because we're a Bryce Huff supporting podcast.
It was Swift though that fumbled.
Yeah. Swift fumbled. You're right. Yeah, I can't remember who tackled him when he did it, but Quincy recovered it, and so both Williams brothers recovered a turnover in that game. I think it was the first time brothers had ever done that. And Quincy was like, the last time we both had a sack in a game, my grandma was at the game, and then she came to this game. We both forced a turnover. I have to get her to come to more games. Quincy is just loving him, just like loving life right now. He's like such a fun personality. The fan base loves him. Every time he does that uppercut, they go crazy.
Mm-hmm.
But Bryce Huff, I just wanted to shout him out again because I think he had 8 pressures, 1.5 sacks. He's playing a lot more now. They're starting to play him on first and second down. Like, he's becoming like a well-rounded defensive end. His price is just going up and up and up. I don't get the sense that they've necessarily talked to him about an extension yet. I could be wrong. But they should. And maybe he doesn't want to do it now because he thinks he's going to make a lot of money in the offseason, which he absolutely will. And maybe waiting it out and going somewhere where he can.
You see guys getting hurt everywhere.
Getting hurt. Right? Yeah, totally. But he's a great story. Like, I asked Jermaine Johnson about him. He had a great long answer. Like, his journey, he was undrafted. He fought his way onto the team, was playing sparingly for the first year or two, and he just like built himself. He just developed himself. He grinded. He's a very popular figure in the locker room. He just like does his job. He doesn't really say much, and he's just like a very unique player because he's not like tall or like he's jacked, but he's not like huge like weight wise. And he's just so fast. He gets off the line, and probably in part, again, we've talked about this, probably in part because he doesn't play like 80% of snaps. He's able to sub in there, and they don't know what to do with him. He gets the quarterback, they pull him out, but he's playing more, and he's playing well. And he's one of the
PFF didn't like him, right?
Yeah, I know. I always feel bad for PFF when I tweet out those because I do tweet out when I feel like they're right about stuff. So I kind of I feel I have to do both because Jets fans get mad at me for any time I tweet PFF stuff because they disagree with it only when it's bad. But anyway, I think Bryce Huff has been an absolute marvel this season. I think he's been one of their 5 to 7 best players, along with Jermaine Johnson, by the way. So I think you got to lock down Bryce Huff because I think Bryce Huff and Jermaine Johnson are the future at defensive end. 25 years old. I think they're maybe both 25 because Jermaine was a little older as a rookie. Like, that's a duo you can build around, and whatever you have to pay Bryce, $10 million a year. I don't know. Edge rushers make a lot of money. He's making a lot of noise. He's getting stacks now. He's had sacks in back-to-back weeks. Like, I would lock him up ASAP. As a spoiler, I'm planning to write about that this week. I just think he's been an absolute stud. That defensive line finally played like we talked about leading up to the game, how they needed to get off their blocks. The Eagles did lose Lane Johnson, which should be said because he's the best right tackle in the league. I think he has some ridiculous streak where he's giving up a sack in like 2,000 snaps or something like that, which is absolutely bonkers. He left, and that definitely made a difference. But that's still, they're one of the best offensive line because they have 5 overall, good players. So,
right. And running too, Swift only had 18 yards on 10 carries. They just locked it down.
Yeah, the line, like Quincy and CJ Mosley both had great games. Tony Adams, the corners, like on every level, the Jets were just like they came to play. And well, I guess maybe we can transition to the other side. I'm sure you're about to, and we should get into the pluses and minuses of the offense because there are a lot of them.
Let's do that. And to transition it though, just curious, I don't know if you checked out, what was Michael Dunn's PFF grade?
Did you? Ooh, I'll do that right now.
All right, you do that while I transition.
Start the next topic. Yeah.
Let's talk about the offense. And Zach wasn't. I think we should start with Zach, and I want to take it big picture though. He was 19 of 33, 186 yards. Obviously, no touchdowns, no interceptions. I think you had the numbers. It's the 5th time in 6 games he's thrown for less than 200 yards. But the one thing I'll say is this was the gauntlet of the schedule, right?
Yeah.
And yeah, he had his ups and downs for sure. There were definitely some highlights. There was definitely some lowlights, but he never, like, for lack of a better term, saw ghosts. Yeah. And I don't think there was ever a time in these 6 games when you thought, oh man, he's lost out there, right? Like,
maybe the Patriots game, but that would be it.
That's a tradition, I guess.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah, but for the most part, I did not see that, and that's what we saw week in and week out last year. So when you look ahead to the schedule and you see that there's going to be some lesser defenses ahead of this team, and he got through this part, and now has 2 weeks to kind of look back on it, right? And recalibrate and hopefully spend a lot of time with Aaron Rodgers. It feels like he's maybe on an upward trajectory. I
I think the bar was low. Like, I think
Well,
obviously
that's true. It's
so
upward trajectory from the bottom is.
yeah. So my thing is, like, he absolutely has been better than expected and than last year. And it's the biggest thing is what you're saying. It's he doesn't seem scared out there. He's not making backbreaking mistakes. Like, maybe he's missing guys that are open, or maybe he's holding on to the ball too long sometimes, but he's been more accurate where he's throwing the ball, and he hasn't been making those crazy errors where you're like, what are you thinking? Or the short throws where he's sailing it over Braxton Berrios' head. Like, stuff like that is not happening anymore. And so it's progress. The idea was like, this was going to be the year where he was going to sit and like figure a lot of stuff out behind the scenes. He has to do it in front of, live bullets or whatever, as they say. So
if he was a Green Bay Packer draft pick, he would just be starting for the first time. Right?
Yeah.
He would have sat for like 2 years.
Yeah. I will say he was airing it out a little more. He was just like throwing it up to Garrett and hoping he would go and get it, kind of thing. Like, there was a few more of those throws.
We need those.
Yes,
and I think
that's
an important part of this offense is just chuck it up to Garrett.
Yeah,
I think
and
they don't do enough of that still.
Yeah, and they did target Garrett more finally. Like, we've been talking about that for, probably will be a thing as long as this passing offense fails to get going. But he had 12 targets, Breece Hall had 5, and the rest was kind of split up among like everybody. And that's kind of how it probably is going to be as long as Zach Wilson is the quarterback. I still had some questions about like some of the play calling. But ultimately, yeah, Zach, I think a lot of positives. I think he's handling it really well. In the locker room, Garrett Wilson said something about how they feel on offense, they feel like the defenses are disrespecting them because they're kind of daring them to pass it every week. And I asked Zach Wilson about that, and he's like, yeah, we feel disrespected, but also, like, do you blame them? Like, and it was the most like
one of
the more self-aware, like, mature things he said since he's been a quarterback. Like,
that's like what did you do with Zach Wilson?
Yeah, that's why I messaged my boss after. I'm like, Zach's becoming pretty likable these days. I don't know what's in his cereal, but he's become a lot more likable. And I think,
has Connor not been hanging out at the
yeah, exactly. Maybe that's what it is. Well, Connor wasn't on the Zoom, so maybe that's why. But you have to remember, sometimes he's very young when he came in the league, and he came from a place in BYU and where he was in high school, where he was always just like propped up as like this legend and this guy who was the most popular guy in town and all this stuff, and he could do no wrong. And then you get to the NFL and you have this whole locker room of guys counting on you, and everybody's livelihood is on the line, and he's struggling, and the fans are turning on him. He's getting booed when he comes out in the field, and so I think it all really threw him for a loop. And then a combination of everything, especially Aaron Rodgers coming in, has really changed just the way he talks and walks and looks. Like, he doesn't seem miserable every time he's talking to us anymore, which, I get being miserable talking to us to a degree, but he's really changed.
That might be Aaron, because Rodgers, let's be honest, Rodgers was a ham with you guys for.
Yeah. Well, Rodgers knows how to play that game.
Yeah.
But so it just always seemed like Zach had no interest in being anywhere near us for the first 2 years, frankly. And, that to each their own, like, it's their own prerogative, but he's completely switched. He answers every question you ask him. He handles it pretty well. He's thrown a little more personality, and that doesn't necessarily matter. It's just more like indicative of like the overall, like, Zach is a different guy this year. And again, like, I still don't know that he's like a long-term starting quarterback for an NFL team. I don't think he's shown enough quite yet for that. But the Jets, if they can beat a team like the Eagles with this formula, then they can beat almost anybody. And that's saying a lot. Maybe you're not going to be able to do this every week for 17 weeks. I think that's
asking a lot of the defense to be that good every week.
Yeah, and it's asking a lot of the running game when the other team knows you're going to run it to be able to get anything going. And
turnovers aren't automatic, right? Like,
yes. Yeah, and that turnovers are mostly luck. Like, that's
right.
Generally speaking, turnovers are considered luck. Scheme doesn't get enough credit sometimes in that area, but the quarterback was hit on like 2 or 3 of those turnovers or whatever. So it's not going to sustain at that rate. So you can't count on the defense bailing you out every time. And so the offense needs to do their end of that's been my big question since I was in the locker room on Sunday, and we can transition like out of just Zach now, I guess. They've gotten to the red zone a lot. At one point they were 8 straight drives without scoring a touchdown. On one hand, you could say, okay, they got to the red zone 8 times, and I think they got a field goal just about every time. That's points, but you need to get in the end zone. 0 for 8 is bad. Right now, they are 32nd on third down conversions, and they're 31st in the red zone, and they're 3-3. Like, so what that tells you is if you fix that even a little bit, this team could be very good. Like, but they haven't done it yet. We haven't seen any. I mean, this has been a problem for years. They've struggled on third down. They've struggled in the red zone long before. I
With
saw somebody
multiple
tweet at me.
offensive coordinators and multiple coaching staff.
Yeah, I was about to say. I saw somebody tweet at me. I forget the exact tweet, but it was something like, "Am I watching Adam Gase, Michael Floor, or Nathaniel Hackett right now? I don't really know the difference." Like that kind of thing. And it, for whatever reason, whenever the Jets get to the red zone, they just start shooting themselves in the foot. They get conservative. They get scared. And that's been the biggest issue with Hackett is the scare stuff. But there also has been penalties. And there's been mistakes and there's been turnovers, like things like that. But they need to be more aggressive. Like they finally stopped doing run, pass every single time this last game. They even passed it on first down on their first drive. And I thought, they should throw a parade because they finally didn't run it on first down to start the game.
Which is what they did against the Chiefs too, right? Like that was
But whatever they're doing in the red zone, it's not working. So you got to figure something out because you're not going to win game. Like you mentioned, like I was thinking about this earlier, as you said, and I thought about it earlier. Like where would they be without Greg Zuerlein and Thomas Morstead? Because against the Broncos, Thomas Morstead pinned the Broncos and then they safetied. They got a safety again. They had safety the week before that against the Chiefs and then the Broncos.
Yep.
And Morstead's been fantastic in general. And then Greg Zuerlein has been their almost sole source of points for the last 2 weeks. Like the Jets have
a team that couldn't find a kicker for 10 years. And now
so if this is the Jets of old, like they would they be winning these games because they don't have because they wouldn't have a kicker. But like you can't keep relying on Greg the Leg to make it every single time. It's the most maddening thing about the team right now because that's why it just feels like they're so close. And that's what I kept asking all these guys. Like, do you guys feel like you're on the verge of it? And they're all like, yeah, we just feel like it's like one guy messes up his assignment. Like there was the play, I forget if it was second or third down. There was the bootleg. They get to the red zone. They run a bootleg. And the guy's right on Zach. Nobody blocked him, which I guess is part of it. But like nobody chipped him or anything. And then he just had to take a sack instead of throwing it away. And it pushed them back and it pushed them out of like touchdown range. As it turned out, there was miscommunication, and I don't know what receiver, I'm guessing a tight end maybe, was supposed to like split out like in front of him, and he was supposed to be able to hit him right away, and he would have been maybe not a touchdown, but a first down or get them closer to the goal line. And instead, he got sacked right away, and it killed the whole drive. Like they keep having mistakes like that, and that's partially on coaching and getting these guys in the right position, getting them to know what they have to do. And it's the guys executing, like so they haven't been executing. And yeah, Ryan Hamilton, I can now honestly say I'd rather have Zach start than Trevor Siemian. It does feel like ages ago that everybody was like,
it's a big step.
So my tweets about saying Siemian might be an upgrade have not aged quite as well, probably because I think Zach's better than Trevor Siemian ultimately. But yeah,
your Daniel Jones, Jalen Hurts tweet looked all right.
Yeah, and see, I was worried Jalen would have a big game and then I would start getting retweeted again, but they're awfully quiet today. Although Daniel Jones is like, he broke his neck or whatever. So, but yeah, so the red zone thing, it's the one thing holding back this team right now. Like that and the slow starts on offense and the third downs, like they keep getting themselves in third and long situations. I think I just looked this up for my story I'm doing for Wednesday. I think they on average are at 3rd and 8, and that's the second worst in the NFL. Like if you're on average 3rd and 8, that means you're getting like a yard or two on the first 2 downs, or you're getting incompletion. So they need to fix it out. Nathaniel Hackett, Todd Downing, Rob Calabrese, Keith Carter. They all need to get together during this bye week and do something, figure out what they can do different. I know they've been installing a new offense and they didn't plan for Aaron Rodgers to be hurt and blah, 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 all that crap. But you're 6 games in and this offense is just stagnant every single drive. Like they need to get in the end zone, get the ball to Garrett Wilson. I think Alan Lazard he's been better than people give him credit for. I think Zach has a harder time getting him the ball, but he's been fine. Personnel wise, and maybe this was on your list of topics, I can't remember, but Randall Cobb's got to stop playing.
He played a lot.
And there's a reason why he played a lot this game.
Gibson got six plays.
Yeah, he did, and he had like 15 yards on an end around, Gibson. But Gibson was banged up. He had an ankle injury that showed up late in the week. And from what I've heard, that's the main reason why Gibson wasn't playing more than Cobb. But we also haven't seen any evidence that they would play Gibson more than him yet. So until we see it, why should we believe it?
Right.
And Cobb, to his credit, he caught that 2-point conversion pass, which was an absolute dime from Zach. It was a laser, and it was a good catch. but he's got to stop being on the field for 35 snaps. You can get him in the game a little bit on running plays or whatever it is. Like, again, I'm teasing like something I have in my story. There's 89 receivers that have run at least 100 routes this year. Can you guess who's 89th in receiving yards amongst those? He has 20 receiving yards running over 100 routes. Like 20 yards like that. He's played so many snaps to have no yard. Like it's hard to do that. And he's a really good guy and a leader. And I think he's been helpful.
He can do all those things from the sideline though. He can be a really good guy and a leader on the side.
And this kind of goes into the McCole Hardman thing, which has been clearly the team. We said this, they're kind of showing their hand. They do not like him. Otherwise they would be playing him. I think maybe they didn't know what they were getting when they got him. Maybe they didn't research it enough. I don't know. They didn't have a plan. I find it hard to believe you can't figure out a way to use a guy with that speed. Maybe he hasn't really, adjusted to the offense or whatever it is, but like he should, if Xavier Gipson is hurt, then get McCole Hardman some touches, but clearly that's not in the cards. I think it's pretty clear he's not going to be on this team by the trade deadline. I'd be pretty surprised if he was, unless they start getting injured some more, which I should say, Garrett Wilson did leave a couple times, gave everybody a scare. And when you lose Garrett Wilson, as you know, like the depth already doesn't look great after losing Corey Davis. It looks a whole lot worse if you don't have Garrett Wilson in there. So it's a concern. But yeah, so if McCole Hardman's just like not an option, I don't know, see what you have in Irv Charles or Jason Brownlee, or go and get somebody. Like they need somebody else in there that can contribute, because it's not Randall Cobb. I'm sorry, but he can't be on the field that much. He's slow. He doesn't get open, and he kind of drops the ball when he gets thrown it. And then in terms of other personnel, like I'll just branch off that. At running back, they finally started going away from Dalvin Cook. I think Michael Carter has been struggling. He's been their third down back, like no matter what. And I think the idea is that he's better in protection than somebody like Izzy Abanikanda, but he doesn't really bring as much to the table in terms of elusiveness and the stuff that he showed as a rookie, where he's kind of breaking tackles and not going down. And, he was really, really good as a rookie. It doesn't seem like that player is there anymore. And I think Izzy has some juice. And I think, whether they don't trust him in protection, which I get, but this offense is not going anywhere. You need to get guys that can run north to south, and Izzy is a guy like that. So I would call him up. I'm in the free Izzy Abanikanda troop. I've seen some people on Twitter calling for that. And at tight end, Jeremy Ruckert is starting to play more than CJ Uzama. He made a good catch. He's been really good at blocking. I think his ceiling is a lot higher than any of their other tight ends. I think Conklin, that has been underrated by this fan base. I think he is a really solid tight end, especially for a team that I feel like people on this fan base forget how bad the tight end position has been here for so long. And to have like a solid guy like Conklin and Ruckert is a really good duo. So I play Ruckert, play Gipson, and don't play Randall Cobb would be my message to the coaching staff.
All right. Anything else on the offense?
Offensive line. We should talk about the offensive line. So
it's not getting any better.
Yeah. So it wasn't an amazing game from them, I would say. I think it got better as the game went along. I think Makai had some highlight reel blocks that were getting on social media, but he also gave up, I believe, like 6 pressures and 2 sacks. Like it wasn't an amazing game from him. But the biggest news is that Joe Tippmann, who had really come into his own at right guard, which they didn't even plan to play him. They didn't even plan to start him a couple weeks ago. And he was really, really playing well. And then he hurt his thigh during the game. And when you hear that, usually assume like contusion or something like that, but it seems like it's more serious. Maybe it's a quad or something. Maybe that's why it's a little more serious, but Solid did not sound optimistic. He wouldn't talk about it. Usually on Monday, he tells us, because it's the bye, he's like, I'm not going to say now, because I'm just going to let us get through the bye. We'll get through the bye. And also, he's been optimistic far too many times recently. Like I would say, it's almost become a parody at this point, because on Friday, he comes off the field to tell us that Sauce isn't practicing today. He's not feeling well. So we sent him home, but we think he'll be fine for Sunday. All my mentions were like, he's done. Next day, declared out with concussion, and the fans lost their shit. It's happened too much. He's got to stop saying he's optimistic. That would be my recommendation for him. But yeah, Joe Tippmann, it sounds like he's going to be out a while. We don't know for sure what it is or how long it is, but I'd say plan for life without him, which is very unfortunate for a second-round pick. And all of a sudden, they didn't really have any rookies from that class contributing. So now Wes Schweitzer will fill in. I don't think he played particularly well the other day. They don't have any other options. Their depth is, we're back to where we were last year, with the depth being an absolute issue. You look at the roster, what they have. I think Billy Turner has some experience at right guard. I know that's probably not going to make this fan base very excited, but he might be their next man up at guard. They signed Dennis Kelly, the veteran, last week. He's played a lot of snaps. I think he's played some guard, mainly tackle. So maybe you make him your swing tackle. Carter Warren, the rookie, was activated. So they have a few guys. Maybe you try and sign somebody. I know a lot of fans have been calling for Lael Collins. I don't know if that's going to be a thing or not. They did work him out and then didn't sign him. Justin Pugh on the Giants, they signed like off the couch and he played like guard and tackle the other day and played pretty well. They should have signed him maybe, but yeah, it's a tough spot. They're another injury away from a lot of trouble. Dwayne Brown, I think, should come back in a couple weeks. Maybe that doesn't excite fans. But I do wonder what they do because Makai's been good enough at left tackle. So do you plug Dwayne in at right tackle? Do you make him the swing? Do you keep Max Mitchell at right tackle? Do you put Dwayne at guard? I know Jason Peters played guard later in his career. I don't know. Dwayne Brown's the next best offense. If these are your 5 best, Dwayne Brown is at least one of your 6 best. So it's a tough spot because the offensive line, it felt like it was finally coming into its own. They had multiple games with the same group. And, somebody said it's the Douglas O-line draft curse. It really does feel like some sort of curse because they finally had a draft pick that was playing well and the guy got hurt. Like the Wisconsin waterfall, he's going to be out a while. So it's a tough spot to be in, but at least I don't think the Giants do have some good D linemen. That doesn't scare you. The Chargers have Khalil Mack, but you can double him. So it's not as scary of a stretch coming up, but for a group that, Zach Wilson struggles when he's pressured and the offensive line just got worse. So it's a big, big concern.
Did you get the PFF score on Michael Dunn?
I did, but I didn't like it. So I was trying to avoid
saying we're not gonna talk about it.
They were very harsh and I think it's bullshit because he played a good game. So
there you go.
You guys can attack PFF. Yeah, my permission now.
Attack.
Yeah. Assemble.
I think that's it, right? I think we've covered it. I will say there was chatter in the chat about, and you probably didn't get to listen to much of this, but the Mark Sanchez in the booth.
Yeah, I didn't really listen to it. I'm curious how he was.
I thought he was fine. He didn't stand out either way, I guess, which is good.
That's always good with the broadcaster, a lot of it. Yeah.
I wasn't like, oh man, this is terrible.
Yeah.
But I also wasn't like, wow, that was really
who was he partnered up with?
I just help me out if you're in the chat. What was the broadcast team?
Yeah, I can't. I saw the announcement. I can't remember who it was. He was at practice the other day. It was cool seeing him at practice. He seems to be enjoying the that side of things. I'm sure it had to be trippy because the Eagles and Jets are both his former teams too. So I'm sure that was trippy.
Yeah,
Kevin Kugler. Yeah,
there you go.
Kevin Kugler's pretty good.
Thanks,
usually.
Jeffrey. Snugging with the.
Yeah. Oh, and I'll just mention it briefly because I don't really have much to say about it, but everybody in here by now knows that Rodgers was on the field throwing.
Oh, right.
For the game without a boot,
crutches.
Without crutches. Saleh kept saying in quotes that he stood the whole game, but he definitely sat on the bench a bunch. So that part wasn't accurate, but he was on the sideline, as I reported, and Saleh confirmed he was contributing to the he wasn't calling plays, but he was offering suggestions. So he's back in the mix. I think the fact that he's doing what he's doing is pretty wild. I don't know what he's doing to get there. I think it's still crazy to think that he might play this season, but I don't know. I'm less skeptical than I was at the beginning. I thought there was a 0% chance before. Now I'm 10% or whatever. So
he could have thrown a football around anywhere underneath the stadium before he went to the stadium. There was a lot of options. He clearly purposefully went out on that field without crutches or without a boot and threw the football back and forth. He was sending a message. I don't know if that message is to inspire the team, if it's just to keep himself in the public sphere, probably. To be honest, that's probably more of what it is. He just, he doesn't want to fade away, right? He needs people to continue to talk about him. I think that's part of it. So, but he definitely thought about that action before he did it.
Yeah, he knows what he's doing, and he was in the locker room after, and there's all the photos of him smiling at the camera and stuff like that. So I'm curious to see what his role looks like over the course of his rehab and stuff, and if we start hearing stories about him getting more involved. While people make fun of him for putting his hands in everything, I don't think anybody would be opposed to Aaron Rodgers being more involved in the play calling because it hasn't been
certainly in the red zone. How about you just give him the playbook in the red zone?
Yeah, it's not so much
We're
the
on the
gold zone.
18-yard line. Aaron's calling
hasn't
the
really
plays.
been the gold zone so far this season. So get Aaron in the mix and start scoring some points.
All right, that's going to do it for us. It is bye week, so we're negotiating when we'll be back, but it'll be a mailbag episode, so get excited for that. We'll put the call out for questions. Maybe we can get a couple people on to ask questions. We used to do that 2 years ago. I think we would have people hop in and actually ask a question. So we'll work on that kind of thing to keep things going through the bye week. It'll either be late this week or early next week, but we'll keep everybody updated via Zach's Twitter/X account. But that's going to do it. Thank you. Enjoy the bye week because the Jets are rolling 3-3 where we all thought they would be, right? Not exactly the path we thought they would take to get there. But things are looking up. Thanks for tuning in to the Can't Wait podcast.